G'day hackers, in these videos we're going to be looking at how to build a health and weight loss calculating app. Okay, and specifically what we're looking at here is our body mass index and basal metabolic rate calculators. All right, and we're going to build like a very simple interface using Qt Designer and then take that into PyCharm in the second video and code all of those interactions. So to start with, what we want to do is obviously create our main window. I don't need the menu or the status bar down here at the bottom, so I'm going to remove both of those right from the start. Now, the easiest way to build this app is going to be through a stacked widget so that we can have different pages for our BMI, body mass index, or our BMR, which is our basal metabolic rate calculators. And to do that, first and foremost, what we need to do is set up our window ready to go. So I'm going to make it so that it is this size in terms of the app, and the default size that we have here is 800 by 600, and I'm going to set that for the maximum and the minimum size, so that way when users come in and preview our screen, they can't actually make it any bigger or smaller, and that way we don't have to worry about setting up a really nice elaborate layout manager that's going to scale with the size of the screen. Now from here, what we need is, first and foremost, is our stacked widget. Okay, now our stacked widget in this instance is going to take up almost all of the page, but we're going to leave some space down here at the bottom. All right, and the reason for that is because if we leave the space at the bottom, our stacked widget won't include the elements down here, so the two buttons that we're going to put in, and then once we've got those buttons in, it'll make it nice and easy for people to be able to switch between the two calculators. So let's start by adding those buttons in. I'm going to come in and put in a BMI calculator button. Okay, and then I'm going to come over here and grab a BMR calculator. All right, and with both of those two set, we need to change a couple of properties. So first and foremost, we need to come over and give this button a name so it is easy to identify. So I'm just going to call this one BMI underscore button. Okay, and then I'm going to call this one BMR underscore button, which is going to make it quick and easy for us to be able to find both of those when we start coding in Python later. But the other thing I want to do is change the size to make these a little bit bigger. So I'm going to set the maximum width at 100 and the minimum height and width at 100 by 50. And then I'm going to set the same over here, 100 by 50. Okay, you could go through and make sure that these can't be changed just simply by putting in the same for our maximum. All right, now let's drag these around, just get them so that they're lined up nicely at the bottom so that I can get the spacing right. What I might quickly do is just drop some spaces in. Okay, and then select each of these together and just drop them into a horizontal layout. Okay, so once we do that, we can then scale this out. You can see that the spaces sort of get bigger, but the buttons, because their size has been restricted in terms of minimum and maximum, they don't change size, which means just the springs get larger in between. So drag this one all the way out so we have about the same amount of space on either side, which gets those buttons nice and close to the center. So we've got our stacked widget sitting at the top here, and first thing that we're going to do with it is come to the page, so the page that we're working on, which is this one here, and we're going to call it home. And the home page itself is basically going to be just a nice little introductory page that we can place on the screen that tells our users how to use the buttons below, so these two here, and get into the calculators. It's also going to give a little bit of insight into what BMI is and what BMR is. Okay, so that way if you want to know which calculator you want to use first, you can quickly get a bit of an introduction there. So to do this, or to set this page up, we just need 3 labels. Okay, so we're just going to put a heading label at the top. We're going to have a big label here in the middle with a fair bit of introductory text, and then another label down here towards the bottom that just says click below, click a button below. So to start with, we're going to grab this one here and we're going to put in our heading. So because I know I want my heading to be pretty big, I'm going to drag that out, get the size sort of sitting in the right sort of place. And then I'm going to come down to this one and say, I want you to be sort of size 28 font and bold. All right, that's pretty good. So welcome to your health and weight loss calculators. All right, I want that to wrap as well. And we want that to align in the center because it's going to make things look a little bit easier. So if we do that there, That makes it nice. That's pretty good. Happy with that. All right, this next label here is actually going to be pretty massive because it's going to include quite a lot of text. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly copy and paste this from somewhere else. And then obviously we want to make that a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to put the word wrap on so that it can all appear. And then I want to make that just a touch bigger. So we're going to come in and just change that to font size 12. All right. So these calculators are obviously related to sort of body weight and body mass and then weight loss, or you could use some of this indication for weight loss. So that's why we also include this nice little sort of legal statement at the bottom there about consulting your GP. Okay, so we should always look to cover off that type of thing. And then last but not least, we just need one down the bottom here that says click the buttons below to use a calculator. Okay, and again, we want that one to be obviously much bigger so we can fit it on the screen, but we want it to be the same size as the text up here, which was size 12. Okay, so let's shrink that down, drop it in the middle of the page, sort of there, and then that looks pretty good. So that's our home page ready to go. Now I could sit down and put this into like a fancy layout manager if I really wanted to, but you've got to remember that we can't change the size on this app because the size has been set to 600 by 800. So I don't need to worry about the vertical height here. I'm happy with the spacing between the elements. We could get quite pedantic about it if we wanted to, but let's just leave it like that so that we can move on. Now our next page that we're going to be building is going to be our BMI calculator. So we need to very quickly come over and make sure that on page 2 here, we are renaming our object so that we can target that one a little bit later. So I might call this one, I might just leave it as BMI for now. And then inside of our stacked widget on our BMI page, okay, so now that we've got that one selected, we need to put quite a few little elements in. So again, we need a number of labels, but we're also going to need a calculate button, and we're going to need some line inputs so that we can get numbers from the user themselves. So let's start by having a look at what we're going to do. First off, we want a title, then we want some sort of introductory text sitting here. And then we're going to want a label for height and a label for weight, a label for our output down the bottom here, a calculate button. Okay, so we need our push button, which is going to sit here. And then we also need some line inputs so that we can get that input from the user. So hopefully you can see that this is starting to take shape now. So our heading up the top here is just going to be body mass index. Okay, well, we might add calculator to the end there. Later, I always spell that word wrong when I'm typing. Okay, now for these labels, because we're not actually going to target them with anything, I'm not going to change the names. So obviously it's best practice to do so, but just to keep this nice and quick. If you remember back to the first one, we changed this to size 28 and bold for our heading. So we'll keep that nice and consistent throughout. We don't need to tick word wrap because it's not going over, but I do want it in the center. Okay, our text here that we're going to put in our label, again, I'm going to copy and paste that from somewhere else. So if you want to put the exact text in, you can always pause the video and then you'll be able to very quickly copy that down. I do want that word wrapped so that that's sitting there, and so that I'm consistent throughout the application, I'm going to change this to size 12 so that it's a little bit bigger. All right, so that gives our person a bit of an idea on what BMI is, okay? Then we need their height and their weight. Okay, and then we've got our 2 Q line edits underneath. Let's make this bigger, otherwise that Y is cut off. There we go, that's looking better. All right, so we're gonna have our weight. We might drag that down. Oops, grab the element, drag it down a bit, bring this box across. Sit that there. Okay, and we'll drag the height one down and drop the height label sitting next to it there as well. Okay, this button here is going to be our calculate button. All right, and I'm going to actually keep this consistent with the buttons below. So I'm going to come down to the minimum size and tell it that it needs to be 100 by 50 as well. So that way it's the same as what we see here. All right. Cool beans, that's done. And we obviously need to be able to come up and make sure that we can get these inputs. Okay, so we're going to come up and say that this is going to be our BMI underscore height input and BMI underscore weight input. Now the reason I'm not just calling them weight input and height input is because in our BMR calculator we need height and weight as well, and this just means that we know we're getting it from the correct page at that point in time. Okay, our button here is going to be our BMI calculate button. Okay, and then we've got this big label at the bottom, and well, it's not big at the moment, but I need this to be much bigger because we're going to format that with a fair bit of text. Okay, so from there, what I want to do, make that quite large. I'm going to say to it, you're going to be size 12 so that you're consistent with the rest of the page. We're going to come down the bottom here, say that we want you to word wrap just in case what we eventually put in there is oversized, and we're going to horizontally align that one. Now remember, I don't need it to say text label, so I'm going to come in here and delete the default text that's in there, which means that it is there, but it's just blank. Okay, and we need it to actually have a name so that we can target that. So again, I'm going to call that BMI underscore output, and that's okay. We don't need it to be output, or you could call it output label, I guess, so that our naming convention is the same throughout. So output with a T even. There we go. So that's our BMI page ready to go. Now again, as I said before, we could put this into a layout manager, which is going to space all of our elements sort of evenly throughout the page, but because we can't modify the size of the screen that the user sees or the size of the window, I don't think it's worth mucking around with that right now, because then we can concentrate on getting back into the coding really quickly. So we need one more page. So I'm going to minimize that one and minimize that one so it's easy to see the two. We need one more so that we are able to add another. There we go. Right click on Stacked Widget, insert page, and then we might go after current page there. Oops. Let's get rid of that one. It's in the wrong spot. Okay, we are going to click on BMI, right click there, insert page, after current page, and then that means we now have another page sitting down here that's blank on our stacked widget. So from there, what I want to do, first things first, give it a name. So BMR, because that's going to be our BMR page. All right. And then we need to look back at this one, and we're going to sort of build the same thing, but we have quite a few different elements that we need to add. Okay. And this is where things are a little bit different. So we're going to jump on our BMR page. We are going to start by laying out our labels. So I'm just going to scroll right to the bottom here, grab a label for the heading. We're going to grab a label for our introductory text, okay? But then we need quite a few different things. So the BMR calculation requires the gender of the person, their height, their weight, their age, and their activity level, okay? And we're going to do some sort of cool stuff here. So to start with, what we're going to do is grab a radio button. Where are you guys hiding? So radio button, I'm going to put one of those here and then another one next to it. So this is how we're going to select our gender. So rather than having the person type in their gender, this will mean that we know that we're not going to get any spelling errors or bad input. So that makes things much quicker and easier for us. Then we're going to grab the same sort of thing as last time. So we're going to go height, and then weight, and then age, and we're going to grab some Q-line inputs for those. Line edits. Okay, 1, 2, 3 of those. Now I would normally spend a lot more time lining these up, but I want to really get going from here. And then finally we need some other radio buttons for the person's activity level. So again, I'm just going to scroll up and grab radio button. So we need one for, there's quite a few different levels. So it's sedentary, and then lightly active. Then we're going to grab a one for moderately active. To make that one a bit bigger so that we can actually read the whole thing. Very active. And then finally we have extremely active over here. Okay, so there's our 5 buttons. We're going to space these out. Actually, we might move them all up to begin with. So move all of these guys up so that they're a little bit closer to the top there, because the next element that we need is our push button for calculate. So we're going to drop that one in there. Leave that as it is for now. We're going to change the size to keep it consistent throughout the application. All right, so we're going to move that one up just a touch. And then we need a label for our output again. So again, our label here is going to be quite big. In a second as we move forward. So, label at the top, the title, Basal Metabolic Rate Calculator. Okay, now remember we need to get all of these settings exactly the same so that we have that consistency throughout our user interface. So we're going to come into here, first of all change the font, that's going to be 28 and bold. Alright, so it's pretty big. We're going to then drag this guy across, so he's nice and large. I'm going to extend it to here, but then set it to central alignment to make it a bit easier. Now our text label here, again, is going to include a fairly substantial chunk of text. So I'm going to just quickly grab this from another place. So if you want to copy the exact text down, you're going to need to pause the video in a second. But we're going to set that one to be vertical alignment left, but we're going to have word wrap turned on. And then so again, that we are consistent throughout our application. Hopefully you're starting to pick up on the fact that we want to make all of these elements look exactly the same from page to page. We are going to set that to 12. All right, now these radio buttons are sitting a little bit too high. I might just drag those down a touch. And then we're going to sit down and start to actually identify each of these things here. So first up, we're going to select the male button, and then I'm going to have BMR underscore male underscore radio. Next, we're going to grab our female one, BMR underscore female underscore radio. Then we want to change this label so it says height. And this one's going to say weight. And this one's going to say age. I'm going to leave those all left aligned so that they sort of line up here. Again, we probably try and get that perfect, but just to be nice and quick. Then we're going to come into our line edit and we want to say BMR underscore height underscore input. Then we want these ones here. BMR underscore weight underscore input. And then the age one. So BMR underscore age underscore input. All right, so that gets all of those named ready to go. Next is these buttons here. So we're going to name all of those. So that one's going to be BMR underscore sedentary. BMR underscore lightly. Okay, I'm going to leave off the word active so that I don't have to type that in each time. BMR underscore moderately. BMR underscore very, almost there. And then BMR underscore extremely. Then we get to our calculate button. So this one's going to be BMR underscore calculate underscore button. And that's all set except for the words that's in there. So we might go back and add that now. And then finally we get up to our text label at the bottom. So remember, we want that to be size 12 so that it's the same size. I know that these ones are a little bit smaller, but that's okay. And then we want that one to be word wrapping if necessary with no text in there. But we also need the name to be BMR underscore output underscore label. Okay, so that's our user interface more or less built and ready to go. So let's have a quick look at how this actually works. And I'm going to show you why we need to go back and fix something, but I wanted to demonstrate it with it running. So you can see here that if we click on male or female, it works really, really well. And like when we tick female, it takes away male. All right, and then we can come down and we can do the same with our activity levels. But the issue that we face is because all of these elements are on the same parent level, they all are grouped together. So when we tick male, it unticks the activity level down the bottom, which means that we're not going to be able to get all of the information that we need in one go from our user. Okay, now we could do this a couple of different ways, and I'm going to go back and make some changes to all of the radio buttons that we've got, but we also need to group them differently so that it makes it much easier for us to identify them. So coming back into here, first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the male one here, okay, because it's the one on the left, scroll down to the bottom here, and I'm going to tick checked. Okay, first things first, this means that this button is going to be checked when we load the page, okay? And the reason for that is rather than having to do or code up any error checking, which would be great, but again, to keep it nice and fast, we're going to leave that off. We are going to have these buttons here checked so that when the program loads up, first and foremost, they are going to sit there ticked ready to go. And it keeps unchecking the other one because I haven't done the other thing to fix it yet. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a widget here, all right, and I'm going to just sort of drop it there. Where's the easiest place for me to put this? Drop this down the bottom here where this label is, okay, and I'm going to sort of stretch it out over the screen. And this widget here is just going to be my BMR underscore activity radio buttons, okay, and inside of that, I'm going to grab each of these and drop them in the widget itself. Okay, so this is like a quick and easy way for us now to be able to move those around together. And now you can see here on our object inspector that we have BMR, then we have our BMR activity buttons, and then we have all of our buttons. Let's stretch this right out. But then down further, we have our male and female that don't sit on this same level anymore. Now, I'm just, to be pedantic, gonna come in here and grab a widget. Okay, and stretch it over here. Grab both of these buttons, except you're sitting at the top. So grab both of those, drop them into that widget, and then move that one up. Okay, and this one's going to be my BMR underscore gender radio buttons. Okay, so now they both sit in different widgets, which means when we quickly go through and preview our form, where are we? Preview. Now we can tick male, now we can tick lightly active, which means both of them are now set and we have all of the stuff that we need. But you would have noticed that when it loaded up the first time that nothing was checked down here. And again, so that we don't have to worry about error checking later, I'm just going to come into my sedentary button, scroll down to the bottom here and tick checked. Now I know I did that earlier, but it unchecked because we went back and set that feature for male. So let's have a quick recap of what we've got so far. We have our home page sitting here ready to go with two buttons that sit off our stacked widget, just the three labels sitting there. On page number 2, we have our body mass index, heading, another label. We've got our two inputs in our calculate button, and then our sort of somewhat hidden label down the bottom here. And then finally, in our third page, our BMR page, we've got our Basal Metabolic Rate with our two widgets with different sets of buttons on them, which means that they can both be checked. And I just want to check because I might have forgotten one here. Nope. And then we've got our BMR output label sitting down the bottom there. Again, it's sort of hidden, but that's sitting there ready to go for when we have some output. So the only thing I need to do from here is save my file. So I'm going to come up and go save as. I'm going to sneak onto my D drive. Where are we? There we go. And create a new folder for health app tutorial. Okay, and then I'm just going to call this one main window.ui. Okay, now if you've seen any of my other programs so far, I like to call all of these main window because then that way when I jump into PyCharm, I can copy and paste my boilerplate code in, which means that I don't have to build the base application each time. So I'm going to click save there. All right, so now we're ready to jump into PyCharm. So that's going to be the end of this video. I hopefully be able to see you over in the coding side of things so that we can get this app ready to work. Okay, and I'll see you then.